Now, you may have heard the news that App Center is being retired on March 31st, 2025. That's right, a year from when I'm recording this, depending on when you're watching this. And what that means, if you're using any of the different capabilities, there are recommendations to migrate to new different services out there, some from Microsoft, some from other providers. I want to focus on App Center Build. That's what I've been using to build nearly all of my Xamarin applications. And what the team has done is built some nice export capabilities to move from App Center into Azure DevOps, no matter what type of application you're building. I did this myself earlier today, and it took me just about 10 minutes. So I want to walk you from start to finish and all the other little considerations, those things that App Center did for you that you can tie back into Azure DevOps as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the very first thing I highly recommend reading through is the App Center retirement documentation. Here it will talk about all the different capabilities and the recommended alternative solutions for no matter what you're using. So go ahead and take a look at that. And if you need to get in contact with support, there is a nice contact support button, which is really, really cool. So up here, you can see build. They recommend migrating App Center to DevOps pipelines, and there's an entire export App Center build feature that the team built in, which is really cool. And that's what we're going to use today. Now, why I like Azure pipelines is because you can connect up specifically to all sorts of different Git repos. So whether you're using, of course, Azure repos or using GitHub or Bitbucket or things like that, you can connect up and do all those different things. And I also like the release management. I've used Azure DevOps for many years and I absolutely love it. So a lot of my projects are in GitHub Actions, but a lot of mine are in Azure DevOps as well. So the first thing you would need to do is actually go into Azure DevOps and create an account. So here I've created my account and I have a bunch of all different projects that I work on. So I have my plugins, I have monkey apps, I have a bunch of other apps in here. So I'm just going to create a new project and we're going to call this app development. There we go. And here I'm just going to make it private. And there's some other options such as Git control versioning and agile, which you can mostly ignore if you're not going to use it for other features. But let's go ahead and create this here. And this will take a few seconds to spin up. All right, well, here is Azure DevOps. If you've never seen it before, on the left-hand side, we have different things such as overview, dashboards, wikis, boards, repos, pipelines. Those are my build pipelines, for example. Boards are like my Kanban boards. Repos are my Git repos. There's test plans. There's artifacts. So like that's where it will go whenever I build different things, or if I'm building NuGet packages, I can go there. You can actually go into your project settings if you desire, and you can actually go ahead and turn some of these off. So if you're saying, hey, I'm going to use Azure DevOps only for the pipelines, then I'm going to go ahead and turn off all those. So pipelines and artifacts. I like to keep my artifacts on because I think that's where it drops things. I'm not really positive. But now if I go back over to my app development up here, we can see I have a nice clean side over here, which is cool. So pipelines, we have pipelines, releases. So it's kind of CI and CD, both continuous integration and delivery and a bunch of other stuff as well. So what we want to do first is we're going to want to go ahead and go into App Center. There we go. Now over in App Center, I'll make this a little bit bigger for y'all. Here I have my LLC and then I have all of my different projects here. So some of these are still active and some of them aren't. This one here is my skiing app. Now these are built with Xamarin, but these can be built with anything, whether you're using Objective-C or Swift or Kotlin or Java or React Native. The export process that I'm going to show you is exactly the same. So I'm going to go over to my project here and then I'm going to click on build. Now here, once I go into build, I'm going to see all of my different branches. And when I go into configure, what we're going to notice is that this is directly tied up into GitHub. I have my project, release, different versions of SDKs that I'm using. Here, for example, I am building not only an APK, but also an app bundle. I'm incrementing the version code with every build. You may or may not be doing this. You can also use a timestamp. That's actually even better, in my personal opinion, during this migration. You could have additional environment variables. Here, I'm also assigning it with my key store. And then I could also do additional items as well. Now, if you are distributing it automatically from build, there is additional steps that the documentation will guide you through, but I'm not doing that currently. I do it manually. So you can go ahead and toggle that on if you are already doing it. And then when you do the export, it'll automatically be configured for you, which is nice. Okay, cool. So there's a few ways of getting this here. You don't want to remove it. You want to close that actually, and you want to tap this little button here. Let me zoom in, this little configure button, and you want to hit download. This is the export branch configuration. This will actually allow you to automatically export this in many ways. Here it actually gives you a sample of the YAML export option. And then if you go down into the bottom, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger up here, there's a download button. and you'll be able to download to JSON or YAML. Okay, so what does that mean? And it's a very, very good question. So if you download into JSON, what that will do is export it into Azure DevOps pipelines, and it will be more of a GUI-based solution. That's what I use for almost all my projects. I just sort of like it. I don't know why, I'm old school maybe, but I really like that. It's kind of similar to App Center, where there was just a GUI where you could select different things in your build steps and it would just handle it for you. If you download the YAML, that will actually be checked into your source code, and then Azure pipelines will automatically pick that up and then build it. That's very similar if you use GitHub Actions for any of your projects as well. So those are the two different options there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to download the JSON here, and I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now I've created a folder on my desktop called Meisner, and I'm just going to go ahead and save it in there. All right, perfect. So if I go over into VS Code, I can open up my JSON file. And let me see if I can make this pretty. There we go. I have the pretty JSON extension. And what we can see inside of here is that there's a bunch of variables such as last commit messages, different mobile center, which is what it was called originally, and app center output directories. These are basically all of the settings that Azure DevOps are going to need. And as you scroll further down, we get into the build processes and steps. Now you don't really need to know too much about it, but you do want to do one thing, which is scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you will see this project ID, which is to replace your Azure DevOps project ID. Well, how do you get it? That's a good question. And actually, if you go into the documentation, there is a URL that you can specify here that will give you back all of your project IDs. So I'm going to go ahead and do that over here in a new tab. So I'm going to pull that over. Perfect. There we go. And up top, it's going to want your organization, and that is my name up there. Perfect. And this is going to give me all my different projects. And the one that I just created is app development. There it is. And I can go ahead and copy the GUID out of here. And now I'm going to go back into the JSON file and paste it in there and save it. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So once we have that, we can now go back into the pipelines. And then what I'm going to do here is tap on this more actions icon and say import pipeline. This is going to ask me for my JSON file. I'm going to go ahead and go to my desktop, into Meisner, select that JSON, and this is going to import it into Azure pipelines. That was actually pretty quick, but there are a few things that need to be specified still. So the first thing here is we're going to want to give it a name. So we're going to call this my Meisner Android app. There we go. Then it's going to want an agent pool. Now you can actually connect Azure DevOps up to a build machine that you have, or use the Azure pipelines hosted. And then here, the iOS and Android apps are built on macOS. So you want the macOS latest build over here. Now, if you're building a Windows application, you'd obviously want Windows and the latest build there. So now let's go ahead and see what this is doing. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and we can see that there are several steps in this job. So this agent job 1 is going to run over here, and it is going to take all of these variables, which are all of those things that were inside of that project, in that JSON file, and it's going to use these when it builds. So if we go back to task, we can see that it has these build scripts, which is doing a bunch of App Center build scripts that are just like magical things. It tags the build. It goes and sets the mono version. In this instance, because I'm building a Xamarin app, it says the Xamarin SDK bundle, so you can go ahead and use this. It switches the version of .NET to use. It installs an Android key store. I'll get back to that. It does some NuGet restore. It sets the version in my Android manifest, and then it builds, signs, copies those bundles to staging, builds, signs an APK, and then copies and publishes those artifacts. Now, if you are building in other applications that aren't Xamarin applications, so if you're building, for example, React Native applications or native language applications, this is going to look probably relatively similar, but down here, the build and for whatever you're building is going to be a little bit different. And of course, you're not going to have like .NET-y stuff up here, but it is going to be relatively similar when you're importing it here. I would, of course, do the same thing for my iOS project and import it as well. Now, at this point, you can make a few decisions. So for example, do you still need your APK? If not, you could actually go ahead and disable that. Over here, you don't have to delete it. You could disable those selections over here, which is really nice. Here, if I want to keep it, I can go ahead and re-enable those items as well. That's cool. And then of course, you can always verify these other items too. Okay. So now that we've imported this, there are still a few things that I need to do specifically for Android and of course for iOS, which is upload my key store or my P12 certification. So there's a few ways of doing that. Here we can see that the app bundle is being signed. This is actually being signed by this JKS store over here, and I'll explain that in a second. Here, this Android signing is using version 1, and this is using the jar signer over here. The APK signer is using the APK signing tool here. Now, these are both different because you can't sign an Android app bundle with the APK signer. Just use the jar signer. It's a little bit complicated. But anyways, you need to upload your key store. How do you do that? Well, if you click on the sign APK, you can actually go over here and select from the drop down. I don't have one, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the settings, browse my files, and then I'm going to select my key store. Perfect. And I'm going to upload it there. Okay, that's pretty good in general. The other thing that I'd want to do is actually set these variables for the key store password, alias over here. Now, it didn't export these because they're passwords and aliases. In fact, they're null. So if you go over to your variables, we're going to see here that I have an alias. And if I unlock it over here, we can see that it's blank. Okay. I can go ahead and re-toggle that on and lock it. So it's kind of like nice and secure. So I'm going to type in my alias here. I'm going to go ahead and type in my password. I'm going to tell Edge not to remember that. There we go. Perfect. And then that's the key password. I also need the key store password over here. And I'll say, perfect. There we go. So of course you can toggle those on and off. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle it on. I'm going to just make sure I spelled it correctly. There we go. Cool. Perfect. I'm going to check the alias as well. Perfect. So of course you're going to want your key store information there. All right. So beyond that, the other thing that we're going to take a look here is the build IDs, which are these build numbers. And once we have that set up, everything should be kind of good to go. Oh, there's one other thing actually. I don't know what magic the App Center team was doing, but if you look here at this install Android key store, this actually downloading a key store and it is decoding it or doing something to it. I couldn't really figure this out, so I did email support. If I found out information, I'll put it into the comments below, but I'm going to disable this for now. Now, this key store was actually being used to sign the Android app bundle. So my assumption here is that this key store was being used as this encoded argument that was downloading it and saving it locally into this JKS file. So that's what I'm assuming this script does. I don't really know 100%, but that's my assumption that is happening here. Okay, so instead of using the keystore.jks, we're actually going to change this over to version 2. Now, the different versions use different specifications. Basically, this is still using the jar signer. If I switch this over into version 3, this is actually going to use the APK signer over here, which is kind of fascinating. So what I'm going to do is go to version 2. And then what I'm able to do is actually select that key store since I've already uploaded it. And it's going to use the same exact key store password, alias, and everything that I have set up. And it's going to use the jar signer there. And I'm going to be good to go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this just for good measure and save it out. And hopefully it saves. All right, there's one more thing I didn't do, and it gives me this error which says I don't have access to service connections. And that is because if I go up to the source, I've not specified where my project lives. This is actually very important. Here it can live in a bunch of different places. My project is in GitHub, so I'm going to select GitHub. I'm going to use OAuth to sign in. That popped up in another window, but I'm going to go ahead and authorize it. Perfect. There we go. And then I can go ahead and select a repository. So I'm going to type in Meisner there. This is a private repo. So this is going to go ahead and search my GitHub repository and select it there. And then what's nice is that I can set the default branch. You can go ahead and do a bunch of different, toggling how you want this to be triggered and a bunch of other items as well. But I'm just going to say this is the main branch, and let's go ahead and save it again. Perfect. So here, there we go. We're saving the options. It's saved. We have all of our variables. We have triggers, which right now are disabled, so I don't have continuous integration. It's just manual, but I could toggle this on, for example. I could go ahead and do scheduled. I can do pull request validation, all that goodness that I could expect. Here I can actually set up different build properties and build number formats, and I can get my badges, everything like that. And of course I can get history, which is cool too. All right, the last thing I want to talk about here, now that we've disabled the Android Key Store and we've updated the app bundle signing, is this set version. Now this is going to be different for everybody. What is going to happen here is how I had selected in my project. If I go to configuration again, we can see that I have the build ID set up. This would be different if I was using the timestamp. It would go ahead and generate a different script, but here I'm using the build number. Now this is using the build number from the Azure DevOps inside of here. So you may want to use that or may not want to. Now I use a lot of Azure DevOps, so my build number is now magically much, much higher, but I might want to set that manually here or run other scripts. So that is up to you. But now all I got to do is go ahead and queue this up and hit run. And this is going to go off, and it's going to basically do the same thing that App Center used to do, which is go off, pull and run those job items automatically. All right, well, now that goes ahead and compile. Many of you have reached out to me and you said, hey, I'm interested in learning even more about mobile development with .NET. Where can I get started? Well, there's great stuff right here on my YouTube channel, but my good friend Nick Chapsis and the team over at Dometrain actually just released a brand new .NET MAUI course. So I want to go ahead and talk about that really quick. They're not a sponsor of this episode, but I just want to call out, and they gave us some special offers as well. Over here, my good friend Brandon Minnick, over here is a longtime Xamarin and .NET MAUI developer, has actually 2 different courses on Dometrain, .NET MAUI Getting Started, and the .NET MAUI Deep Dive. You can learn through all the different things about .NET MAUI, from custom controls, memory management, async await, REST APIs, unit testing, manual testing, and so much more. If you are just getting started, the Getting Started guide is absolutely brilliant. This live interactive course is available right now over at Dometrain, and you can actually get 20% off by using my coupon code. The first 50 people can get 20% off by using James20 when you go ahead and check that out. Thanks to Nick for giving that code. Now let's get back to our build. All right, so over here we can see that the job is going and restoring the NuGets. Now all we got to do is wait. All right, our job is completely done. It took about 9 minutes there, which is pretty good. And now what's nice is you can go through any of these different items. So again, one thing that you might want to check out is that version. Here, this set this to 2575, which is the build number right here. So you definitely want to check that out. Okay, so now that we have our build all set up, what about the artifacts? What do we want to do with them? So before we were sending them to App Center, or maybe we were sending them through App Center Distribute, but also maybe to TestFlight or to Google Play, for example, and you can still do that with Azure DevOps as well. So one thing I want to show down here is when we finalize and clean up the job, we're also going to have artifacts as well. So we have publish bundle, publish build over here, and we're totally good to go. So let me go ahead and go back over here. And what's nice is that when you go into your build output, we can see the 2 published artifacts. We have our build, we have our bundle, yay, we have everything we want. And you can just download it manually from here if you wanted to, just like you could have downloaded it from App Center as well. Now, like I said, if you were in the pipeline earlier here, when you hit edit pipeline, and you actually had an App Center distribute at the end, that is because you optionally were sending through App Center to a location. Now, personally, I don't like to do that. I like to actually sign off. I like my builds to be happening sort of all the time. I don't want to send every single test or every single build off to TestFlight or something like that. So if you actually toggle out the Azure DevOps pipelines, you can go into releases. Now over here, there are no new releases, but you can create a new release pipeline. You have a build pipeline, a release pipeline. And what you're able to do here is I'm just going to select an empty job template. And I'm just going to say, yeah, stage 1, that sounds good. And what I'm able to do is say add artifact. So over here from my build in my app development project, I can go in and select the source build that's over here. And that's going to go ahead and pull those items from me. Now what I'm able to do over here is go into my first stage. So you might have multiple stages. So you might have, for example, test over here. You might have another stage, which is Let me do empty, and then I might do like, test flight or something like that. They might have production or something like that. So you might have these different items here. So what you're able to do, just like on the build pipeline, you're able to set up different jobs and runners. So here, for example, this is just going to go ahead and run. You can select any of the different items. So I'm just going to say Azure Pipelines. Let me just do it on Mac again. You can do it on Windows. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and select a new job. Over here under deploy, we're going to actually see that you can still distribute to App Center. So this is really good to know that since App Center is still supported till 2025, if you still need time to migrate off all of your distribution, you could do that as well. So here you could still distribute to App Center. And what this would do is you would verify and create a new connection with App Center. The other thing you're able to do though is go into deploy, and you can see there's things like App Store Release, App Store Promote. If I type in Apple here, we can see we have all of our Apple ones that are going on. We have an Apple App Store Marketplace builds. There's other things that I can integrate into. I can also type in Google, for example, here, and this is going to be my Google Play release, promote, increase rollout, status change, things like that. So I can actually do a release here. This would go ahead and create a service connection. I create an app ID, and I could give it a bundle path. So for example, inside of my AAB, I might go ahead and select that, upload the single bundle. What track do I want to put it on? I can select that automatically from the dropdown, and I can add different release notes and things like that as well. The cool part of the pipeline is you can also set up continuous deployment. So if you did want to do this every single time on the main line or on pull requests, you could add that. That's that little checkbox. In addition, you could also do pre-deployment conditions. So for example, you could say, oh, well, I want this to happen, but I don't want it to happen until somebody signs off on it. So maybe it's me, for example, that I need to sign off for this to happen. Maybe not for test, but maybe if I want to upload it to test flight or something like that. So you're able to set up this full production pipeline along the way. So that is really, really cool. And then there's retention as well of these. You have different options that you can set up, different variables that you can set, and all these different items as well, just like you could in the build. So once you have that all set up, you're totally good to go. So here I can go and remove that, which is really, really nice. So again, once you have it uploaded, you might take that release and promote it through the different cycles as well. So that is how you create your different stages of your release pipeline. And that is actually really just how easy it is to move from App Center and your build configuration, come over into Azure DevOps, create your first pipeline here and get your builds going with a bunch of different steps, and then send it off to Google Play, to the Microsoft Store, to test flight, to anywhere that you want by all using that export. Now, I also mentioned that you can go ahead and, of course, and export the YAML and put that directly into your source code, which is nice. And you can, of course, then link your Azure DevOps to your source code repository. It will pick up that YAML, and that's nice because then different branches all use different YAML if you want. So based on your project needs, if you want that infrastructure as code that's inside of your project, that's in your source control, that is totally an option as well. Not to mention that you can even take the pipeline that you've created in JSON. You can even export that to YAML as well later on. So it's very flexible options. So that is really, really cool and nice to know. So I wanted to point all of that out. Now, the last thing I wanted to point out is a few additional settings that you might need to be aware of. So if I actually pop this out, there is not only pipelines and releases, but if you go to library, there are secure files. So that is where that key store lives. Now, if you are going ahead and using the YAML inside of your source control, you want to upload your key store and your P12 certs and everything here as well. You can then create variable groups that are used across multiple pipelines. And you can add them all there too. You can also select on that project settings again one more time. And if you ever need to add or remove different service connections, you can go into there and you can adjust it here. So you can add those all up. And there's a lot more options and settings here as well. All right, that's going to do it from start to finish, taking your App Center build and migrating it over into Azure DevOps pipelines. Hopefully you found this video beneficial and insightful. I use not only GitHub Actions, but Azure DevOps for a lot of my different projects. And I've been moving all of my App Center builds over into Azure DevOps. I found those little things with the version number and the encoded key store and things like that, that I wanted to make sure I pointed out during this video. So of course, if you run into issues, let me know in the comments. And of course, don't forget to reach out to support. I did. I had a few questions about it, and I did ask, yes, I did ask for them to give the ability. I sent a ticket in. I said, please give me the ability to export my key store and all my passwords and information in case you forget those. If you do forget them, of course, Google Play automatically resigns like 90% of applications. So it's probably not a big deal, but probably still important at the end of the day. Remember, folks, keep those aliases and passwords to your key stores. Also important. All right, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks again to Nick Chapsis and the team at Dometrain for supplying that 20% off a coupon for the first 50 folks that sign up for the .NET MAUI different training courses. Either of them 20% off. Again, the first 50 folks that do that with my coupon code James20. And of course, thank you so much for watching this. Let me know what you think, what you're using for CI/CD for your mobile application, no matter what you're building. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Give this a thumbs up if you liked it at all. And again, thanks for watching.